everybody, to our 12th Scholars in the Square lecture of the fall season. It's also the last lecture of the season. I want to say hello to those of you who are joining us on Zoom and those of you who are joining us in the future on YouTube. For those of you who are new to the format, the plan is that Dr. Mobin will offer a 20-minute presentation, and then he will engage in a 20-minute period of conversation with Dr. Darmir Rudnitsky, who's a professor in our anthropology department. After Dar and Ashraful talk for 20 minutes, I'll chair a 20-minute open discussion period. So our speaker today is Dr. Mohammad Ashraful Mobin, who is a postdoctoral visiting research fellow at the CSRS. With us, he is conducting a comprehensive and detailed study that seeks to explore alternative monetary systems from a religious perspective. He completed his PhD in Islamic finance and sustainability in 2017 at the Global University of Islamic Finance in Malaysia. Since 2017, December, he has been the director of Ifintell. Is that the right way to put it?
Yeah.
Okay. An Islamic finance intelligence company. I've always thought that if I had to live my academic life over, I might study religiously inspired alternatives to existing economic systems. That's actually what got me into religious studies, is liberation theology. The way these systems offer economic alternatives based on radically different ethical and ontological principles has always been fascinating for me, since they speak to the ways spiritually informed ways of knowing often allow us to see into the heart of the status quo and to imagine other ways of being in relation to one another. And so with that impulse in mind, before I step aside, I want to acknowledge and respect the Hmong peoples on whose traditional territory the university stands, and the Sanghees, the Esquimalt, and Wasanish peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Please join me in welcoming Ashraful Mobin.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Asher and Scott, for putting all this together. So this is going to be a story for 1500 years. So we have to fly over the time. Let's see how fast we can fly. To start with, I will start with Trump. Let's see what he said. If you look at the last two sentences, last two lines actually, right? They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in the international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. And that's only 4 days before. You may agree or disagree with him, but I thank him to make the comment just before my lecture. It's more relevant, and it's not boring. So the thing that we are talking about is kind of interesting, the approach there. But the thing is, looking at this tweet, right, you might have many questions. Why is the currency so important? Or the US dollar is very important. So there are many questions. I can't afford to answer all the questions. I have less than 20 minutes. And of course, I'm not capable of answering all the questions, but I'll try to answer a few questions, but mostly from Islamic theology perspectives. Right? So to understand Islamic theology, we need to understand how it works in Islamic religion, actually. So here's a chart. Okay, if you look into this, in the religion of Islam, there are actually can categorize into 3 classifications. One is the faith, like what is God, hereafter, all this part. Second is the law. How do you operate your relation with God? How do you operate your relation with other human beings? The third part is the ethics. How do you behave to your parents, to friends, to neighbors, to other religions? All goes to ethics. On the law part, you have fiqh. That's actually the jurisprudence. Arabic term is fiqh. And these, the legal issues, it also have 2 parts. One is, they call in Arabic term, fiqhul ibadah. How do you interact with the God? How do you pray? How do you fast? All these things. Second part, they call it fiqhul muamala, means how do you do everyday activities? And as you can see, they have the family law, criminal law, business and commerce, and all other politics, sociology, everything. So for each and every sector, they have millions of books written, huge studies over the last 1500 years. But our focus today is business and commerce. That's what we're going to talk about. Okay. So now the question is that you could ask me like, okay, there is business and commerce. So, and that's a religion. How do they derive the policy, the law for the business and commerce? How does it, do they like just derive it from their own, their team? No. So that's actually the sources. one source, they call it the Quran, the book, the Islamic book. The Muslim believes that this Quran is actually holy scripture, is the word of the God revealed to Prophet Muhammad. By the way, every time I say the Prophet Muhammad, I will try to use the word prophet because almost half of the Muslim in the world named Muhammad. Right? My name is Muhammad. Use the word Muhammad if you're confused. Many of the citations that we have today is Muhammad. So that's why I'll be very specific to mention Prophet Muhammad, so you know who I'm talking about. And second part of the source is the Hadith. Hadith means the saying, the activities or the approvals of the Prophet Muhammad. Right? So anything that is in the Quran, Muslim must have to follow. There's a very basic source. And if it's not in the Quran, then the scholars look into the Prophet Muhammad's saying and activities. But the thing that it becomes complicated, let's say cryptocurrency. During the Prophet time, we didn't have that. How the scholars talk about that, right? Or many other things they're happening in this last 1500 years. So how do you talk about it? It's not in the Quran, it's in the Prophet time. So then they have some additional criteria. One of the criteria is the ijma, means all the scholars, they agree. All the living scholars of that time, they agree on something. That also can be a source. And this one, the next one is very important for our talk today, is the customs. Customs in a community, customs in the North America, it could be different from the customs in the Middle East. And Islamic Sharia or legal, they recognize the customs and put much importance. The condition is that custom has to be not contradictory with the Quran and the Hadith, the Prophet saying. And maybe the most important secondary source to understand the currency debate is the maslaha. It means a public interest. You look into what is good for the people, right? If there's a new issue that's not in the word of the God or the Prophet saying, then you look into, is it good for the people or not? Right, and all these ideas that we have different sources, they also listed few objectives. What are the objectives of these different sources? So they have 5 objectives here. Number 1, the protection of the faith or religion. Number 2, protection of life. Number 3, protection of intellect or the knowledge. Number 4, protection of the lineage or the family. Number 5, protection of the wealth. Interesting thing here, it has a sequence. So if you put in a situation like you have a conflict between whether I should save my family or save my life or save my wealth or my life, so you follow the sequence. So this is how actually the scholars they derive different times, different legal jurisprudence and things like that. That's how it works here. Okay. So from all these sources, the scholars they actually come up with few basic principles. One is riba, the interest, then the uncertainty, and the speculations. All these are actually from the Quran and Hadith directly derived from. I need to jump times. So, okay. Now the concept of currency. If you think all of you studied the currency in school, right? What is the money? Money has functions, medieval exchange, store of value. You need to back out, but I'm not going to focus on that part because we can have different discussions how it works, but I will focus more into Islamic legal perspectives. Okay. During the Prophet time, what was the currency? That was a gold dinar. Prophet established a state, but that state did not mint any coin. They used to use the Roman or Byzantine or those coins actually, right? And the word dinar and dirham, it also mentioned in the Quran literally, and other rulers after Prophet, they did until 1924, the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Right. So the first Islamic ruler who actually came up with the minting coin in 697, Prophet passed away in 633. So that was 697, the first time the Muslim rulers come up with the currency or the minting gold coin. And still now there are some groups they say like, well, with one gold coins, we don't think paper money is good, so let's go back to gold coin. There are a few groups in different parts of the world, they have different movements, they work on that. Now the question is that, well, there is no question about the gold currency, in gold dinar. It's mentioned in the Quran, very primary source. How about the paper currency? Do you think this is permissible or not? So scholars have huge debate on this matter. one of the reasons of the debate actually, like this incident happened, that was the prophet city in Medina, they call it, right? They used to have, they call it self of debt receipt. Means I give you the loan and we put a receipt on that, right? And you can actually, what they used to do, they used to sell this receipt to each other, right? Then one of the prophet companion, his name is Abu Hurairah, is very famous scholar. He came to the ruler. Did you legalize riba, the interest rate? He said, no, I did not. Then what are you doing this? The thing that you are doing, that's you are selling something that you don't own, is actually going back to the riba question. So then he withdrew all the receipts from the market and settled on the debts. And that incident has been referred to many jurists and classical scholars later, even today, that paper money not allowed, because in the bank, actually what they do, they sell up debt that happens. Right. So this one, then of course the uncertainty and the riba will be globally accepted. All these reasons are there why they think that paper money not allowed. Many classical scholars. Well, then there are many other scholars who think, look, you're talking about the currency. This is not a product. It's not related to the riba. They have different other arguments. For example, Imam al-Ghazali, if you know about the Sufism, he is the guy actually always refer for the Sufism. Ibn Taymiyyah, if you know about the Salafism, he is the guy everyone refers for the Salafism. Both the referred guy for the Sufism and Salafism both say it's fine. It doesn't have to be an intrinsic value as long as community accept that as a currency. Right? So, and he put the condition, community has to accept as a currency, and that it doesn't have to be, okay, against the primary sources, the Quran, riba, garar, maisi, like no interest, no speculation, no uncertainty, is totally fine. Then debate goes on, right? Many academic research have been done, many of the global institutions, they rule against the paper currency. But recently, the Muslim scholars, they sit together in 1982, actually, that happens. OIC, it means like body for the United Nations for the Muslim world, Organization of Islamic Corporations Conference. They actually have a body, OIC Academy. They sit together and say paper currency is permissible. They listed all the reasons. They go to the custom, they go to the public interest, Makasida Sharia, the object Sharia, and they agreed paper currency is allowed as long as it doesn't go against with the basic principles. So that's the end of the story of the non-commodity money. But the question is that now that oil, we had the story of the gold dinar, we had the story of the paper currency, community acceptance. However, the Bitcoin, right, it's not even the government backed, right? And the speculation is very high. Today is going up, coming back. So what we do with that? There is a deep question in from the scholars for these days. Many of my friends and they started talking about that. What do we do with that? So if you look at the currency, you need to understand whether physical currency, digital currency. For example, you have the wallet, coins. That's also kind of currency, right? And then you have the fiat money, your credit card. Usually these don't carry the cash. We only have the card, and we don't touch the money. Just tap and it pays. It's also digital currency. So digital currency and cryptocurrency are different. Digital currency still state backed, and cryptocurrency is completely different, decentralized. There's the basic idea was Bitcoin. Of course, these days we have the stable coin that backed with the USD. We have the CBDC, central bank digital currency. Central bank is coming up with the new cryptocurrency, so story is changing. So what we do with the cryptocurrency? So all the Islamic scholars, they sit together many times, they agree. So they decided to disagree. They classify it to two classes. One is a commodity. Okay, in Islamic contract, you have three things you must have. One is the asset that you buy or sell. Second is the contract. For example, I'm buying something that has to be legal contract. I mean, am I giving a loan? Am I investing? So there could be different forms, right? Or I'm paying you just because you're working for me. There has to be a contract. And third is the medium of the contract, the currency. There are three things: commodity, the contract, and the medium of the contract is currency. So then Islamic scholars, they said like Bitcoin could have two rules. One is a commodity that you can invest in, or it can be a currency. So then they divide again, right? So if the cryptocurrency as a commodity, what's the ruling? Indonesia, they come up with a fatwa, their government body, they said cryptocurrency is impermissible both as a commodity and currency. You cannot do anything about that. Why? Because it's very speculative. You can do all kind of gambling thing with that. You can do all the AML, because the anti-money laundering, CFT, counter financing terrorism, or big issue in the world. So, and with the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, you can do that, and many other reasons. Cryptocurrency is not permissible. Then from Malaysia and the rest of the world, they say like, no, you're not right. Just because it has the risk, it cannot be impermissible. Any business that you do, anything that you do, you have the uncertainty. Just because of uncertainty, you cannot say it's impermissible. Then, however, the speculation is very volatile. And if you consider it as currency, it's not stable. All the basic questions, account, store of value, medium exchange, there are questions. So debate goes on that part. And they could not agree on that unanimously again yet. Either it is commodity accepted or not, some say accepted, some say not. Now about the currency, right? So again, now you see that Turkey, that Egypt, that Palestine, and many other government Islamic bodies, they say as a currency is not permissible. Then some of other scholars, they say, well, you actually can say it's permissible because if you hold the crypto, some of the scholars say you need to pay zakat. Zakat means in Islamic term, the 2.5%, whatever the additional amount that you have, need to pay to the certain class like poor or travelers and others. So if you hold the cryptocurrency, you need to pay 2.5% of that. So if you're required to pay, that means it's permissible. And so there are debate goes on that part. It's not settled down yet. So, and also there are different diversity. Some of the scholars from Malaysia say, well, crypto is fine if it's gold backed, even it's better. Now you have many crypto that is gold backed, right? So then they are saying the crypto is another way to going back to the original currency of gold dinar and thing like that. So there's the issue of the fintech here. So main issue once I look into the crypto is the speculation that scholars are arguing. Then I thought like, well, I have some background in the data analysis, but don't we look into the market volatility and compare it with fiat volatility and see how it is. So if you look into this actually, right? First one is the crypto is from -15 to +15, the almost 30% volatility, where for the developed country, fiat currencies volatility is -1.5 to 1.5 or 3% volatility, where in developing countries is almost 5% volatility, compared to that crypto almost 10 times higher, the volatile it is. Some literature I studied, almost all the papers, recent papers, they are not from the Islamic perspective, they studied it from the data perspectives, how the crypto and fiat looks like, and most of them say crypto cannot be a currency, but it can be a commodity, because it has the capacity of storing values, right? And many of them also disagreed on that and say, well, we'll see. So what I say actually, like, I'm still working on this using some artificial neural network model that I think got the Nobel Prize this year from the UOT to predict the crypto price or the fiat price and to compare all these things. And so it's an issue. So look at that. So now the thing is what we can do in future. Right? I'm jumping because that's already showed me 5 minutes. Right? On the future, this is very interesting. This topic not only a topic for economists or Islamic economists, it could be a topic for everyone, right? Because without looking into the political matters, you can't actually go very deep into the currency matters. It's the issue of political economy. So that one thing, and also the ethnographic research, not only for the crypto, looking into all the Aboriginal community, indigenous community, what they had actually. That way, I looked into the Islamic history. What is the gold dinar, the logics. In the indigenous community, they could have some other currencies. We can derive from their principles and how does it reflect to the Bitcoins. And quantum computing is coming, that's changing everything, right? Now we have the Bitcoin, the beat, now then we have different things, right? How it would change the concept of currency, future of money. When you talk about that, so we are ready for the future. And of course, market volatility and systemic link that we call in finance. How the whole market is connected to each other, capital market to the insurance market to the banking market, from one country to another country, called the systemic links. And they're connected to any crisis that happen, financial connectedness or contagions. I'm sorry for using the jargons. But just to mention, because to be records, anyone want to be future research, it can be reference for them. So, I know it's very complicated. I'm not the one to make it complicated because the topic itself is complicated. Even in 1937, when it was kind of Goldberg and Eugene of the Bretton Woods, still Henry Ford said, it is perhaps well enough that the people of the nation do not know or understand how our banking and monetary system works. If you understand, there would be revolution before tomorrow morning. So it was said 1937, and what is happening now after we don't have the Goldbeck anymore, the fiat money, crypto, maybe what Trump said, well, forget about the revolution. So that's it. With that, I conclude here. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ashraful. That was great. All right, so now Darmir and Ashraful are going to have a conversation and for about 20 minutes, and then we'll break into a larger conversation after.
Okay, great. Well, I really enjoyed reading this paper and I enjoyed the presentation. I guess at the outset, I'd like to thank the Center for hosting us and facilitating the conversation, Paul, Rachel, and Scott. And thanks to Ashraful for this great paper. I think it was a really exemplary synthesis of Islamic thought about money. I haven't seen this in any kind of synthetic form before. So I think there's a tremendous amount of potential here. And I really liked how you illustrated the sophistication of these religious and theological debates about money that are taking place in Islam. I also liked how you were really going back to the deep history of Islamic thought, quoting scholars like Al-Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah about, and showing how sophisticated these debates were and how they still resonate today. How 10 centuries ago, Al-Ghazali recognized that money was a social construct, not a material object. I mean, I think that's, he came up with that idea 1,000 years ago. And we're still wrestling with that today. I mean, still some people, as some of your sources suggest, want to think of money as a thing rather than a symbol or a relationship. So I think one of the real valuable things that the paper does is it makes this tradition of robust philosophical and theological thought visible. And that's often forgotten today when Islam is, I think, often misrepresented as being traditional, locked in tradition, or backward looking, or something like this. I think you're engaging with scholars who are really like grappling with serious contemporary technological developments that are going to have profound implications on how we live together, and trying to figure out what the implications of that are. So I think part of what I see my role is really trying to get you to take this paper to the next level. And I think the first question that you might want to think about, and I'd like to hear your response to, is what do you see as a central contribution or main intervention of the paper?
Interesting. So I would say connecting the dots. We have many papers that also talk about gold dinar to fiat. Papers talk about fiat to crypto. There are papers only talk about functions of money and how it's happening. There are papers that talk about only the qualitative part, not the quantitative part. What I try to do here actually put everything together, so it can be a reference for anyone who wants to take it further. I think that can be a central contribution.
And how about the audience? Like, what do you envision as the audience for this argument?
That's interesting. So while I was writing the paper, I had to go through multidisciplinary literature, sociology, anthropology, data science, even for neural network, I have to go through the physics. How does it develop as well? And to understand the neural network, I have to dive into the neurology, how the neurology works in the biology actually. So, and then collecting data and all these things. So I think it would be a general audience who are interested into money questions. to understand. Anyone could be like in the anthropology, economic anthropology, in the physics, economic physics.
Okay.
So anyone had interest in the economics and the money question,
Yeah.
they would like the paper, I guess.
Okay.
Is there a field called economophysics?
Yeah, there are many scholars. I had one professor, his name is Professor Balal Baki. He from the Caltech, also taught in Harvard and Stanford. He was a physics professor at the National University of Singapore. Now he's working quantum physics. So he came up with a new subject, quantum finance. And now he's working on Islamic quantum finance.
Wow.
So it's a very prominent field, economics.
Wow.
So, so I think those are good things for you to think about, like how you want to frame this and how you want to maybe steer the argument to appeal to specific constituencies. I think another question that might be worth thinking about for you is how you think this work might enhance our understanding of either Islam or religion in general. I mean, can we make any kind of general claim about the relationship between Islam and the economy, or Islam and capitalism, or Islam and the market, or Islam and different other kinds of economies based on your research?
Well, I was going to the literature, thanks to Brian. He shared his library for medieval literature usually on different religion, actually, right? So I was going through different literature. He shared, then Ryan Kadler, he wrote a paper actually, how the different religion talk about usually what he claims actually they are in the medieval time, not only Islamic religion, all other religions, the scholars was arguing or promoting the ban of usually and other things. Right? But why now the Islam is prominent once it's come to the economic principles, mainly because of the scholars. What Ryan claimed that they got the rock star treatment.
Yeah, yeah.
So the what I'm trying to say here actually, right? If you look at the history, the question of life and death are always there. Where we are from, what will be, and this question of life and death, it gives a question of religion and faith, right? And so in life you have the economics.
Okay.
And once you think about where you're from and you go much deeper, you have the religion. So it's always interconnected, right? Either you believe in religion or not. So the way you answer the question of life and death, that becomes your faith. So I would say faith in economics. It always, it's also like how you drive your economic lifestyle, right? In many cases, our ethics connect to our faith.
Okay.
Right? And our ethics drive our economic cycle, how we do it.
Yeah.
So it was always there in upper level. Now coming down to very narrowing down to the Islamic religion, other things, I think most of the Abrahamic religion, also other religion, they actually have very structured economic principles.
Yeah.
Right? And it actually drive also before Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
There were Judaism and Christianism. There are the economic principles for other religions, and it actually drive other communities. How do they behave in the economic principles?
Yeah.
After Prophet Muhammad, over the last 1500 years, in the Caliphate and different things, so it dominates the market.
Okay.
Market dynamics. It dominates the trade. It dominates the international relationships. Many other things are driven by the economic principles.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not to make a claim, but I feel like it's worth to study further how it was, how it is, and how it could be in the future.
Okay, good. Okay, so now I want to come back to the specificities of the debate, because one of the things that I really liked about the paper was how you said, look, cryptocurrency comes along and you get this range of responses to it. You know, some people come out and say, oh, it should be prohibited. Some people come out and say, oh no, you know, look, we have existing capacity from the sources and from the tradition that can accommodate cryptocurrency. So my question then for you is, given that there are disagreements about what the tradition says about this new object, cryptocurrency, do the different protagonists in this debate have a different set of economic ethics from one another? In other words, do they, from what you gathered or maybe you just have a hunch about this, but I'm interested in, do they have a different ethical orientation toward economic action? In other words, Daud Bakar, who you cited, compared to the MOE or some of the other people that were critical of cryptocurrencies. I mean, does that to you suggest that they have a different economic ethic? And if so, what would the differences be and how would you characterize them?
It's a wonderful question. I like it actually.
Yeah.
There are two parts of this answer. One is there are inherent differences among the scholars. In Islamic jurisprudence, they call the madhab. Right? Madhab means school of thought. Right? If you look into Malaysia, Indonesia, usually they follow the school of thought of Shafi. In Ottoman era and South Asia and Turkey, they follow the school of thought of Hanafi. So every school of thought in the Middle East, they follow the Maliki and Hanbali. In Africa, they follow the Hanbali. Every school of thought, there's slight differences. Once it's come to this economic thought, how do they explain the riba? How much uncertainty is allowed or not? How do you quantify the uncertainty? What you talk about the gambling and all these things, most of the things in Quran clear. So all the school of thought they agree. But if the things not clear in the Quran, how do you derive your thought, the process? That's called the madhab. And this and different region they follow different process. So if you look into a scholar from Malaysia, right, his thought might be a bit different from the scholar of Dubai or Saudi because of their school of thought or legal reasoning is different.
Okay.
That is one thing. Second is a market. That one, second part, I was talking to Ryan actually that day. Ryan was saying that the Islamic scholars, they drive the market. I was telling him, no, not only that, also market dynamics drive the Islamic scholars. Means, for example, we have the concept of maslaha, public interest. For example, like if US dollar was not prominent today or the fiat currency not prominent today, I believe the ruling would be a bit different. Like, yeah, gold dinar is only permitted, others not permitted. So in the market, now US dollar is prominent and for the people it's easier to follow the US dollar. I think that changes the scholars mindset, not because the ethical practice, but because the concept of customs and rulings of public interest. And these customs and public interest also differs in different contexts. So I think it's not the ethics, it's actually the answer would be the context.
Okay.
In different contexts, scholars would interpret rulings differently. For example, Daud Bakar, he was the chairman of Sharia Council, he was the chairman of Central Bank. He owns a football club.
Right.
He is a Sharia scholar. So, and his different perspectives is very pro to analytics, all these things.
Yeah.
If you look into the scholars in Indonesia, they are very much into the book and scholarly books and in the classroom environment. So there's a market dynamics that actually drive them differently.
Okay. So that gets me to where I was really going, which was, do you think that this debate about cryptocurrency is really a debate about capitalism? In other words, when Mira and the MOE and some of the other people that are critical of the cryptocurrencies, when they make those, and when Bakar, by contrast, Bakar endorses the cryptocurrencies, what they're really arguing about is not so much the cryptocurrency, but they're arguing about the market and the extent to which the market should pervade human action and social institutions. What do you think about that? I mean, are they really arguing about capitalism or is this just about cryptocurrency?
Well, that's a different question, right?
That's good.
Because the question is first, is capitalism okay or not? So, for example, if I ask the question, is democracy good or not? Right. So we believe democracy is good because it gives the freedom to the people. But there are many counter arguments. Capitalism, we believe maybe is bad, but what other options we have? Right. So now there are many books you find the Islamic capitalism. There are many scholars talk about the Islamic capitalism. Capitalism is a reality at the moment. It's a practical thing. So you want to alter this? for example, like in Islamic finance, the way theologists theorize the whole theme, the way it's been practiced, much difference. And I believe the difference because of the capitalism.
Okay, so I like what you said, but you didn't actually answer the question. So what I wanna know is, I mean, do you think, let's take the MOE, right? The MOE is the Majelis Ulama Indonesia. This is a central scholarly body that's responsible for the state administration of Islam in Indonesia.
Right.
Now they come out with this very firm,
ruling,
strict ruling against cryptocurrency. My question is, when they do that, are they trying to put limits on market behavior and on capitalist behavior when they do that? Or is, and maybe you've done this, maybe you haven't. If we were to look at other rulings, could we make an argument for the MOE perhaps trying to redress some of the inequalities that have emerged in a country like Indonesia, you know, the massive gap between the ultra wealthy and the very poor? And so is this kind of an attempt to, is there an attempt by the MOE in order to create a more economically just system through the types of rulings that they're promulgating, the cryptocurrency debate merely being one? Or is this really just about cryptocurrency?
There are actually quite a few phases of this questions. Number one is that the Bitcoin promoter, they believe Bitcoin is not only a currency, or it's actually a tool against fighting against USD.
Well, okay.
They believe that, and there are many, actually, I know I met different places actually, they told me like, look, we are buying the Bitcoin not because we want to be rich or want to be capitalist. We are buying Bitcoins because we want to bring down the USD. That's what they believe.
That's interesting.
It's a fight against USD. So if you look into the crypto from this, because it's just decentralized, right? It's more, there's a more democratic currency. So if you look from these perspectives, so Bitcoin is one way is anti-capitalist.
Okay.
Number one. Number 2 point is that if you look at the MOE fatwa, right? In the fatwa, they mention also the ruling. Fatwa means Islamic ruling of the scholars, right? They mention this bank rule is against to this particular bank regulation. They have the central bank regulations of Indonesia, so they mention different law and regulations, and the way they put it there, that we are banning this because it is against our current regulations, our current laws and regulations. And when the Dawood Bakar, his ruled actually it is permissible. At the same time, he was actually sitting, I think, chairman of Security Commission, or Sharia Council, also central bank, but he was thinking differently, different ways, right? And his argument was that cryptocurrency cannot be a currency. Cryptocurrency can be a commodity. You can invest in this, but it's not matured enough to be a currency. So one way, because I can't read his mind, but from the actions, it could be seen that it is driven by capitalist motive, right? That is one point. So this is actually, even to answer this, it's quite diverse. There are different elements and segments of the questions and the answers as well.
Yeah, no, and I get that. And so I just have one last question that I would raise. So you said that some of the people that you encountered while you were doing the research saw Bitcoin as a bulwark against the US dollar. And so I guess and then you interpreted that as a critique of capitalism. But one could also interpret that as a critique of a certain geopolitical order, to come back to your initial slide, right, with the BRICS. And so, you know, maybe it's both, right? And maybe it's a I'm not actually convinced it's a critique of capitalism. I think it's really a political move, right? It's a political move against the hegemony of the US dollar as the global unit of account, the global standard for world trade. So I guess the last question then would be, would you see Islamic finance in general as an economic project, or is it a political project along the lines of BRICS? In other words, is it a political project, or to invoke an earlier example, the non-aligned movement, right, that came out of the Bandung conference? I mean, is what is at stake in Islamic finance more political rather than economic?
In context of BRICS or in general?
Well, in general, I mean, I think, it is what the people that are involved in Islamic finance is what they're doing, trying to create a new political organization, or is it an economic project, or is it both? Is it political and economic? And maybe we can't separate the two.
Whenever I study the economics, I can't actually separate it from politics.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. I think capitalism and everything it has both components. Politics, I can't separate. I'm studying only economics, not politics. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Every time I'm studying in economics, I feel like political element is there.
Yeah.
Political motivation is there. Political consequences are there.
Yeah.
And so politics is built in actually
within
economics. That's my understanding. Okay. Now for the Islamic finance, the way they are doing is demand driven, not supply driven.
Mm-hmm.
Demand driven means most of the countries Islamic finance is happening because people want it. And people want it not because from the political motive, but because from the religious motive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In some countries, for example, Malaysia could be an exception, where is supply driven.
Yeah.
And in case of Malaysia, it could be a political motive, considering their racial concentration and all other equipment. But for many other countries, for South Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Middle East, it's actually, I don't think it's political motive at the beginning, but now once you got a $2 trillion market size, right, what you can do with that? Now it becomes a question. Can you drive it for, well, I have $2 trillion market size, what is religiously driven?
Yeah.
So you got the bargaining power.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Tar.
Okay.
That's great. Now about 15 minutes for some broader conversation, and also those of you who are with us on Zoom can ask Rachel. Gary?
Thank you.
Next.
Thanks so much. I'm just curious. I imagine in these sorts of debates, one of the dangers is that the economic exigencies could drive the argument, and you could end up with a situation where the tail is wagging the dog, so to speak. And I'm curious to know whether that accusation gets leveled within the debates. In other words, are there those who are like more traditionalists saying, look, you're not being true to Islam because you're motivated to accommodate the tradition to a set of economic exigencies? Because what's at stake in part is what is tradition here and how much the tradition can accommodate. So I'm just wondering if, like, does that happen? Do people get accused of a kind of bad faith in the context of these debates? Because that seems like such an easy thing to happen given the problem.
It happens. And if you look at the criticism in the literature, for example, people who are criticizing the gold dinarist, we call them from dinarist, we use in the literature they use. Okay, these are the scholars, they are the dinarists. They always claim you are permitting crypto, you are making it permissible, the paper currency, you're actually going against what Prophet told you to do. You're doing something different. You're not doing it properly. So it happens. There's a movement in Mauritania, I forgot the exact name. They say still now, till today, they believe all kinds of paper currency is not permissible. And they've reformed on that. Right. So yeah, but after that OIC Fiqh Academy ruling in 1982 that fiat currency is permissible, all those criticism kind of stopped. Not that level. Previously, maybe 80%, now is 10%. Right. So that was a critical moment actually for this debate, for the paper currency. But for the crypto, is still going. For example, Dawood Bakr, he's a very great scholar. But once it was started talking about crypto is permissible, people start talking about his football club. Right? You own a football club, so you're not a proper scholar. So, but the football club and the Sharia ruling have nothing to do with each other, right? So, yeah, this kind of thing happens.
Kazyani and then Kikela.
So I realized today that Paul was lying to me why he got into religious studies. He told me a completely different reason. Today he was
I contain
exposed.
multitudes.
Like Ashraf's project.
Yeah.
So Ashraf, I'm really curious about like I know like in Pakistan Muslims are a majority, so of course like loans and all of that is discouraged, I guess, but like where Muslims constitute a significant minority and a political constituency in various countries, like for example India. In such countries, I believe, like, for example, in India, Sharia law is accommodated to the extent family law and other things. But I was wondering about like other countries also where, Muslims are accommodated to some extent, but when it comes to Islamic finance, they have to follow the specific law that's going on. So, and this ties to your question on ethics and lifestyle. So how are these Muslims living their, what they consider an ethical economic lifestyle? And what does the government do then?
Interesting. Very interesting question. For example, it could be a much easier question. How do you operate in Canada? Because the questions, that answer your questions, right? Like,
and I would also say, I would also say like in countries where they're like a major political constituency, like the United States or like in India.
In case of India, I can give you a specific example. I was following the news in India, what's happening in India, especially in terms of Islamic finance. I visited Delhi a few times with the people who are working for Islamic finance actually. So there was a push actually to have the Islamic finance regulations before this current government, right? So at high level, almost decided, State Bank of India, they agreed, but at the very high level, they did not do it. So what they actually have at the rural level is like microfinance. That one thing. The business people in India, they do transactions between them, among them actually. For example, you need the investment in your business, I give the investment on partnership basis without going through the bank. But even I go through the bank, then it would be like without interest. So what the religious scholars, because in India you have quite a few good schools of Muslims like Dawand and you have the Lucknow and a few other places. What their ruling on that context is that if you have to go to the bank, go to the bank. To the activities, additional amount, the interest, you give it to the charity without hoping for any rewards from the God.
And how do you operate as a Muslim?
So if you look at
Sorry,
that actually goes back
I'm
to the,
working the moderator so much, you think to kill me.
so no, the thing is that so this very difficult actually. For example, like if I came to Canada, it might be easier for you to understand. Like in Alberta, Peter like they have a new law actually or regulations that now the Islamic home financing they can actually operate the banks, then they can operate the Islamic home financing. So Muslims in every country or the Islamic finance promoter, they are trying to have the law so that the banking institutions can actually have the regulations to operate Islamic finance products. Now, the way the bank operates, right? Bank is a factor of interest. They take the interest from you, they give the interest high rate, and in between they take as a profit. And they have the liquidity risk management and other few other issues they manage. That's how the bank operates. So if this bank have some Islamic solutions, well, I take the loan from you, but I take it without interest, or I take the investment from you, and I give other people the investment. That's how the Islamic bank works. In Islamic bank, they don't use the word loan, they call the word investment. And that goes back to, if you look at this very specific Quranic verse, where the God says that those who consume interest in the day of justice, they will be stand such like they are driven by the devil. Why? Reason behind, they say the business is just like interest. And then saying that I have permitted business and I have prohibited interest. And that's the formula the Islamic banks, or any banks have Islamic products they follow. They don't call it loans, they call it investment. They don't give you the cash capital, rather that they will invest in your business or they will give you some products, usually. But there are exceptions, of course.
Yeah. I love following big questions like these. So like there's a material reality here, right? For the individuals' lives, like the way you access currency switches, like even in the digital kind of currency that we're dealing with our bank cards and whatnot, but like what's the spiritual implication for how folks are going to actually interact with this technological change in the way currency is, like, let's call it displaced or like detached from kind of real existence, like to kind of make that make sense more for me. Sorry, Evan, but like, you know, buying something and like doing something transactional, whether I use my bank card or withdraw the money, there's like a real world kind of process to that. There's a real world exchange, a material exchange. The crypto, to me, my limited understanding of it is it's entirely displaced from like physical reality. What would be the, if you can even guess at it, kind of the spiritual implications
So
on the level you're talking about?
if you look at this chart, right, the fourth line, right, fiqh has two classification, fiqh ibadah and fiqh muamalah.
Mhm.
So there's a very basic principles. Once it's come to praying to the God in Islam, you cannot do anything what is not prescribed. Means if you pray, you have to pray this way. If you fast, you have to fast this way. But once it's come to business, it's completely opposite. Means only the prohibited thing you cannot do, everything else you can do. You see? So in the once it's come to prayers, you can only pray the way that the way it is suggested. Once it's come to the business, you can do everything else, not only the prohibited things. For example, like here, what is prohibited here? The interest rate, things that are uncertain, gambling, or there are a few other list of prohibitions. If it's not in the category of the prohibition, you're allowed to do that. Either it's technology or whatever comes in. Technology is never permitted, permissible, or not, impermissible. It's a technology. That's totally fine as long as it does not have any prohibited element. So that doesn't conflict with your spiritual matters.
Wow, that's very excellent.
I'm just trying to get a fact straight. I'm a Muslim and I'm trying to invest $50 in Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin is now 100K, like the value of one Bitcoin, and I'm getting, let's say, 50,000. So basically, I'm investing and I'm getting a profit on that. Is that profit permissible in Islam? And if it's not, like I've invested $50 and I'm getting 50,000 USD dollars as back. If I have to donate rest of the money and keep my $50, then what's the point of investment?
Very interesting question.
No, I'm just trying to get
No, there's a question like usually if people knows I'm working on this, they will ask me this question first. So this is a very common question. I also the ready answer for that, right? So the way it works actually, right? All these different opinions, that is one matter, right? And given the additional amount, so at first you need to look into, right? Or do you have any other option of investment?
Okay.
So at first you decide, is it impermissible or impermissible? Okay, how do you decide on it? It depends. There are different schools of thought. Which one you are following? So the scholar that you are following, according to him, if it's permissible, you go and do your profit. No problem with it. Okay.
Okay.
So and the scholar or school of thought that you are following, according to that, it's not permissible, then you don't do it. But if you're in a situation, for example, in Canada, if you deposit your money to the bank, you must get the interest. You don't have any other option.
Yeah.
Then the additional amount that you get, you do the charity.
But one of the arguments, like supporting your investment, would be that you've undertaken risk by putting the $50 in Bitcoin.
Right.
So because you've undertaken the risk and you could have lost money,
Uncertainty.
then that would be halal,
Business.
right? That would be permissible. What makes interest impermissible is that there's no risk of loss, right? There's a guaranteed rate because the debt is collateralized and the interest rate is fixed, right, is 5%. And that is what these injunctions, particularly the one against riba, is pointing to. So it's the risk, it's the undertaking the risk that makes the profit permissible.
But I was thinking the other way around. It's the risk that you should avoid according to Gharar.
Once this comes to, okay, there is the very important question.
Yeah.
Usually in finance, we define the risk by uncertainty.
Right.
So if you cannot quantify your risk, then it becomes gharar, the excessive uncertainty. Right? For example, like I'm telling you, I'm selling you the fish in this lake. I don't know how many fish in the lake. I'm selling you all the birds in the sky. I don't know how many birds in there. There's the excessive level of uncertainty. And if you look at the prophet saying there, that he said here, for the sale of the work is not with you. So it's not with me yet. I ordered some car, it will come after 3 years. I don't have the features, anything like that. A Tesla new model. I don't know how it is, but I'm selling you for $3 million. There's excessive uncertainty. What Durham has said actually, there's a very basic concept of Islamic finance, we call the risk sharing concept. In Islamic finance, any contract that you do, you share the risk. And in conventional finance, you transfer the risk. Is I don't take the risk, I transfer to you. I give you $100, you give me $110. I don't know how to give it to me. But in Islamic finance, I give you $100 means I'm sharing the risk. I'm investing in you. Anything happened to you, I would have to bear the risk as well. So there's a risk sharing concept.
Can you, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the sort of early history of these principles, but I wonder if you can reflect a little bit on Dar's question, which I thought was really good, and you tried to dodge it a couple of times. He was asking you to kind of go macro and to think about whether these are political gestures, like the gestures right now around Bitcoin, or whether they are really about the mechanism of investment, in this case, Bitcoin. But if you go back to the original decades in which these principles were being articulated, how would you see, because one of the things I found so marvelous and curious about Islamic principles around interest was this kind of pushing back on what seemed to be the status quo arrangement of the way that this sort of business was transacted. So was it at that point in the 7th century, to use your language, kind of political or ethical? In other words, Prophet Muhammad and company were looking around at the way the world was and saying, there's one thing that's really, really unfair about this particular economic order. So we can, this is a more ethical stance. Or are they saying, we need to stand against this broader culture? And this is a good vehicle for doing that. This is getting at kind of another sneaky way around getting back to Dar's question.
Well, I think one of if you look at the histories, one of the arguments for why interest was prohibited was because people were going into debt slavery. And you were creating this situation in which you had all these people selling themselves into slavery or selling family members into slavery. And so one historical interpretation of the injunction against interest in the Quran has been that, it was to create a more just social order in which you didn't have this situation in which people were going into debt servitude.
Yeah. But people went into debt servitude both before and after that in Muslim and non-Muslim societies. Right? I mean, there were ways in which people compromised their liberty, indentured labor, etc. For a long time, right? So and people didn't bend entire religious principles to reject it. But what do you?
Sure. So the thing is actually like this is a very interesting question. Islam has political principles, very specific, like the economic principle, the we're talking about. It also has very specific political principles. What you can do, what you cannot do, how the state would be, is it democratic or not? There's a different kinds of principles there. And it's interplay definitely. So if you look into the Islamic studies, you cannot study without the politics. So political motive, economic motives all go together. Now, all the motives goes back to like how do you submit yourself to the God? So either all the economic things that you are doing, main purpose, main motive behind that, submitting to the God. Whatever God says, you don't question, you submit. It comes to the politics as well. There's the philosophy works. So economics and politics goes together. Definitely. Either it's in religion or in conventional. We can't separate the political economy.
That's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much. are welcome, of course, to come tomorrow at 11 o'clock, tease out the conversations we've had a little bit more tomorrow. So just to give you some, give you a reminder, we're not going to be having any more lectures until the new year, until 2025. So the first one is Leah Murnock, who is one of our PhD fellows, and it's Yoga and Christianity, a stretch or a perfect match. So please join us for that, online or in person. So take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Well, okay.